Well, yesterday I stumbled across something pretty fascinating I had no idea existed, and it's the UK National Risk Register. So basically this is a Home Office document where it talks about the various kind of threats that might be faced by Britain, and the likelihood of what they are, and the severity of them. So here I found a chart that basically shows a load of them on this chart, so we're going to have a look at this in a bit more detail. But it basically talks about like natural disasters, terrorism and things, and urban unrest, and sort of how likely it is to happen and how severe it would be if it does happen. So there's two things. There's obviously this image, which is like a very short summary of it, and then there's the UK National Risk Register of Civil Emergencies 2017 edition you can find from the Cabinet Office, which is an absolutely massive document for what it is. It's 71 pages, and it basically talks about all the things, what you should do if you come into contact with them, and some of this is typical bad government advice. Like if you're exposed to chemical weapons, the best thing is to stay put and wait for somebody to get you, not trying to evacuate the area. Although it says sometimes it might be a good idea to evacuate the area, so it seems that they're not entirely sure of what you should do, but it's quite interesting to have a read. You can find it on the government's website, and I'll try and remember to put a link in the description. So it's got natural hazards on there such as coastal flooding, river flooding, surface water flooding, storms and gales, cold and snow, heat wave, drought, space weather, volcanic eruptions, poor air quality, earthquake and wildfires, diseases, pandemic influenza, emerging infectious disease and animal disease, major accidents including widespread electricity failure, transport accidents, industrial and urban accidents and system failures, societal risks including industrial action and public disorder. So that's just the first bit, and then you've got the second bit, which is malicious attacks, which include attacks on crowded places, attacks on transport, attacks on infrastructure, cyber attacks on infrastructure, cyber attacks on services, larger scale chemical, biological, radiological or nuclear attacks, or smaller scale chemical, biological or radiological nuclear attacks. Obviously the bigger scale ones are considered more severe but less likely to happen, so they kind of take that into account. So this whole thing is pretty fascinating to read because it's a bit like a war emergency guidebook type thing, but a publicly made available one where it talks about risks of things and then what the results are. So I haven't read it in total detail yet. I skipped a bit, so I was more interested in such of to do with chemical weapons and things like that. But overall, this is actually quite an interesting thing. And you can click on bits of the PDF and then it takes you to various websites that are relevant, so that's all quite good and interesting. But anyway, what we're going to do now is zoom in on the actual picture I've got in the video, and we're going to look at this one in more detail. Okay, so let's start off by looking at the likelihood scale at the bottom. So this obviously goes 1 to 5, and 5 on the right is the most likely, whereas 1 is the least likely. Now weirdly enough, on the likelihood scale, for 1 being the least likely, there's actually nothing in it all along the chart. So that's strange, but anyway, let's look at what's in here. So likelihood of 2, which is unlikely, is an earthquake, and you'll notice that's the lowest severity as well, and I think that's just simply because when we get earthquakes in the UK, if we ever do get them, they are very, very low on the Richter scale, so they're not really going to damage anything, so we might get an earthquake, but it's very low. But you'll notice, weirdly enough, actually in all the likelihood boxes for low severity, there's nothing on there. So just above the earthquake one, we have another one which has a picture of a couple of trees on it by the look of it, which is wildfires. Now obviously wildfires are actually going up in likelihood now because we've already had a couple of different ones this year. So they're going to probably, I'm sure, move that to the right on the next time they do one of these. To the right of that, in likelihood box 3, is a picture of a flower, which actually means a drought apparently, and also in that likelihood box is public disorder or civil unrest, and I assume that's getting more and more likely now. Now weirdly, volcanic eruptions is in likelihood of 4, but I'm assuming that's going to be sort of Icelandic type ones where the ash comes over causing travel problems with planes, not actually that there's going to be a volcano that suddenly erupts in the UK. The water one is systems failures, so I assume that's like public utilities, like power, electricity failures actually got its own symbol, but so I guess this is like cut off of drinking water or something like that. There's also the I think it just means storms. It looks like a tornado on there, but it just means storms. So they're considering those much more likely. Now if we scroll up a bit now, what you will see is the attacks on crowds, so like terrorists sort of either driving vehicles into people or shooting or stabbing people in the crowd. or a bomb, of course, that is considered 5 on the likelihood, which means basically it's bound to happen non-stop. I think generally get like 2 or 3 of those attacks in the UK each year. So yeah, in here they do consider that terrorism is pretty likely, and they have it as an impact severity of 3, because I guess it could kill loads of people in one area but overall not affect the country very much. Now, slightly less likely in here is things to do with pollution. Oh, there's always pollution around. Heatwave, well, we have one of those this year that went on for ages, so that should be in likelihood 5 now, I guess. Space weather, whatever that entails, I assume it means solar radiation and things like that, or solar flares. And infectious disease, so, you know, that's fairly severe infectious disease, I guess. But it's going to depend totally, I guess, on what disease it is. Now, in the less likelihood box, going backwards, we now have cyber attacks on infrastructure. So that's going to obviously be like where systems are hacked, causing problems. So now if we go up to Severity 4, we've got transport accidents, so I guess that could be, they've got a plane on there, but you get road crashes all the time, so I assume this means severe transport, major accidents, not minor accidents in the key. So this would mean like massive pile-ups on the road, or obviously plane crashes, something like that. Electricity failure, apparently that's not very likely. For some reason in the UK, I don't know particularly why. Flooding, again, that is more likely than they say, because there's an area near us that floods every year that they want to build a load of houses on, so they'd be getting yearly flooding. Cold and snow, yeah, you definitely get cold every year. When we get snow, it does actually cause a lot of severity in the UK. Not that it should, just because we're totally inept at dealing with it. As I said, I like the cold quite a lot. So now let's go to likelihood of 2 in category 5, which is chemical biological attack large, even though it's got a radiation symbol. So does this include radiation? Again, it's the Home Office not being very competent, but so I'm assuming this means NBC or CBRN attacks on civilians or in a town. I've spoken about dirty bombs and chemical attacks before. But interestingly, on the likelihood of 4, as the most severe thing on there is pandemic flu. And as I've been talking about bird flu and everything before, you'll know that basically, there's a high probability that eventually we will have another severe flu outbreak, and when that happens it will kill a hell of a lot of people. So it's interesting to see that's acknowledged on here. But as I said, if you want to read into all this stuff, you can do, because you can just simply download the massive PDF full of all this information in a lot more detail off of their website, and I'll try and remember to put the link in. But I just did not know anything like this still existed, or at least as a publicly released thing. As I said, I think some of the likelihoods need to be moved around a little bit on here, because it seems like some of these things we've had in the past year that are considered lower likelihood than things we haven't had in the past year. But other than that, this is quite an interesting little chart. So, as I said, if you want to look at this, have a look at it. It'd be interesting to see if America and other countries do an equivalent of this as well. But regardless, thanks for watching, and yeah, I was quite interested to see that this was something that actually existed.